Hello, everyone, and inside today's Friday mailbag, it is all prospects and NHL draft talk.
You're Locked On Canadiens, your daily podcast on the Montreal Canadiens, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 1071 of Locked On Canadiens, your daily Montreal Canadiens podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where you get your team every single day of the week, wherever you get your daily podcasts, Google, Apple, Spotify, or here on YouTube.com. Today's episode is brought to you by GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Some terms do apply. I'm rushing through this intro because we have so much to get into. I am one of your hosts. I am Scott Metla. I'm joined, as always, by the active stick, Laura Saba. And if you're watching on YouTube, you watch me point to the wrong screen here that I haven't figured out 5 years into this yet. And if you are also watching on YouTube, you know we have a very special guest today. We are joined by Hadi Kalakeche at HadiK_scouting on Twitter of Locked On NHL Prospects. Hadi, thank you so much for joining us. We have 7 million prospect questions here that we're just going to rapid fire at you over the course of this show. So I hope you're ready for that.
Firing them up. I'm ready.
All right. The biggest thing is, and Laura and I have talked about this almost ad nauseum at this point, and we're a month and a half from the NHL draft, is we know the Canadiens need a forward. We know there are a lot of good defensemen in this draft. You having the eye of a scouting talent, what is the Montreal Canadiens' biggest need going into this draft? We could just say they need, a talented player. Yes, duh. But when you look at their lineup now and their prospect pool as it stands, what does this group need to push that rebuild over the edge from rebuild to we're ready to go and start pushing for actual contention at things?
Yeah, they need active, transitionally capable, physical top six wingers. That's really what's needed here at this point. And there are so many fits that can go in here. A lot of them, though, are being developed as centers. So that makes things a bit complicated. I think last year was an opportunity to add a player like that. They went Reinbacher. That's still a fine pick. But yeah, in terms of what the Habs need, really, I mean, what really stands out is top six wingers. Because they've got Nick Suzuki. He's slowly but surely turning into a bona fide 1C. There were questions about that earlier on, but he's quelled a lot of them this year. Kirby Dachs looked great in his first full year with the Habs and was injured last year, but he's still a really good player. And they got a couple of prospects who can play kind of bottom six as centers. Owen Beck, potentially Florian Jacki down the line. They've got a couple of those guys, but I don't think they have anyone in their pool in terms of wingers that I would say is a bona fide top six winger. So I think that's the most important ad in this 2024 class.
The good news is that with them picking 5th overall, someone is going to likely fall into their lap. There's a lot of very good defensemen in this draft class, and there are teams in need of defense picking in that group there. But also, we know Macklin Celebrini is going 1st overall, writing him off the board. And I'm going to mess this up again because I've gotten so used to saying his name one way. You have Ivan Demidov, not Demidov. I will get this right, and I will practice this. You so have... I'm going to get this. I'm terrible at this. It took me 4 years to pronounce. And anyways, you have Cayden Lindstrom, and then you have Tij Iginla in what I would consider that, but also Berkly Catton. There's Cole Eiserman lingering around, and then Beckett Sennecke, who we will talk about later on in the show here. In kind of your eye, out of those, let's say those 5, who do you see being off the board by the time the Canadiens come up at 5th overall there? And why is Ivan Demidov going to likely be that next pick behind Macklin Celebrini? Why should we potentially be excited for this player?
Yeah, if he slips, run to the stage and pick him. This is, I mean, if you ask Flyers fans, they'll rip your head off about this, but I think he's better than Matvei Michkov. Like, he is ridiculously skilled. He's the only player in this draft class that at Dauber Prospects we've given a 10 grade for one of his tools, and it's his stick handling ability. He is the most creative, elusive, and just dangerous stick handler I've seen. He's the closest thing for me to Pavel Datsyuk since Pavel Datsyuk in terms of his ability to shift guys, to dangle through them, to create out of nothing. And the solutions he finds, I haven't seen any prospect pull off. The things that he does and the solutions he finds to complex problems, it's next to none. I think he has better handling ability than Celebrini for sure. In terms of upside, he's the closest thing we have to Celebrini. For me, he's a bona fide second overall pick, and in any other draft, he'd probably be a first overall. Like, he's that good. Outside of him, you mentioned the Lindstroms, the Iginlas, the Cattons. Those guys are 3 WHLers, as I name them, the kind of 3-headed demon at the top of the WHL class. And for me, the most likely of the 3 to be unavailable would be Cayden Lindstrom, because, again, just a big boy who can skate really well, who can stick handle really well. He's got a booming shot, and just a lot of really interesting habits that you can build around. He's still raw, but there's upside there.
So I have a question because it's come up from multiple listeners asking in the mailbag, so I'm not going to name them all. They're wondering if there are concerns about getting Demidov here from Russia, mostly because obviously there are some issues with some other players who are already established NHLers that aren't being allowed to come, or there's some question marks around what's going on that side. So a lot of our listeners are asking, is there a concern? So will that make him drop to 5th? And then do you think there's a concern, or whoever's at second, well, Chicago's at second, will just, take that risk because he's that good?
Yeah, so there are 2 concerns with Demidov that don't have to do with his pure skill on the ice, his pure play on the ice. Him potentially not coming over from Russia, and him being stuck in the MHL the whole year. And what's funny is that those 2 things are related. He's stuck in the MHL all year because he's refused to sign an extension and almost definitely will be coming over. Like, there's a lot of politics around what's going on in Russia. There's a reason why he hasn't played any KHL minutes. I mean, if you watch his MHL tape, it's unfair. He's way too good for that level. He could be playing in the KHL, but he's not. It has to do first and foremost with SKA being a very conservative team and who they play and how much they play their youngsters. We saw it with, prospects in previous years. But I mean, almost definitely the fact that he's refused to sign an extension and indicated that he's not interested in signing again in Russia has something to do with this whole situation. I'm not an insider. I don't know exactly what the issue is. I don't have confirmation of this. But for me, the way I look at it, there's no other reason that Demidov would be playing an entire year in the MHL this year. He's just way too good for that level.
That's fascinating to me. It's like the KHL situation is like, it's unfair that some of the players are punished for what's going on in the world. They don't have control over what's going on there, but it's just, there's so many little intricacies in this, like the entire Ivan Fedotov situation, everything with Michkov that's been going on. To hear that, like, this top prospect, the top Russian prospect in this draft, arguably, and I don't think that is too controversial to say that, being like, I don't want to stay here. I want to advance my career. I think that for Kent Hughes and the Montreal Canadiens, if that's, like you said, if he's there for whatever reason, you should be running to the stage. And I guess if they pick him, do you bring him in and you start acclimating him to the AHL game, or because I believe the CHL now is allowing Russian and Belarusian players to be drafted again. Do you hope his rights get picked up by someone there and he starts his development on that side?
I think the sooner you get him playing pro minutes, the better, because he does still play kind of a junior style. The things that he does work really well against MHL defenders, but that's not a high bar to cross. Like those defensemen, think the Q. Like there's a lack of high-end quality in terms of ability to shut down opponents, the ability to stick with players as they're dangling. Demidov he is poison for MHL defenders. Like he just burns through them like nothing. So I think acclimating him to the pro game as soon as possible would be great. I honestly think that there's a world in which Demidov can play in an NHL roster as soon as, his contract's over. Like he's that good. The things he does, yes, he's doing it against MHL competition, but it's things that he can do, I think, at the NHL level. The solutions that he finds, I think even NHL defenders will be surprised by, So that's the thing with Demidov, is the element of surprise. But he's not just a pure stick handler. He's got a fantastic shot. He's got great hands. He doesn't get enough credit for the amount of effort he puts into every shift. Maybe the habits, the positioning isn't all there, but the effort is. He backchecks hard. He gets involved in penalty kill situations, defends the rush really well, which is astounding for a winger. You never see that. There's a lot of qualities here. So I think there's a foundation for an NHL game, but I think that the best idea would be to give him a year, at least half a year in the AHL before pulling him up.
Well, the good news is that if Ivan Demidov is not of your brand of forward in this draft for whatever reason, there are plenty of other people. We have so many mailbag questions that we're gonna dive into with Hadi here, and that's all coming up next. But first, today's show is brought to you by our friends at GameTime. And if you've ever had to purchase tickets for, it is baseball season, you're trying to find tickets, your favorite teams in town, you want to watch some dingers, get some popcorn and a hot dog. It is so hard sometimes to go through all these sites, sit there, try to find the best seat, only to get hit with hidden fees and everything else at the end of it. With GameTime, that's all a thing of the past because they take all the guesswork out of buying tickets with last minute deals up to 60% buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, anything that you are possibly looking for. And it is so simple to do. You can look, find the view from your seat, see the price you're going to pay all in one place. So take all the guesswork out of buying tickets with GameTime. Just download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Some terms will apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download GameTime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. We are back here at Locked On Canadiens, and I guess this is actually a crossover episode with Locked On NHL Prospects with our special guest. Wow, I can't speak on anything today. I'm pronouncing cities wrong, players wrong. I'm pronouncing everything wrong today with Hadi Kalakeche of Locked On NHL Prospects. And the best part about this is Laura is the keeper of the mailbag questions. I get to, yap and yammer for half the show with our guest, and then Laura has all the important stuff. If you ever have a mailbag questions for us, tweet us at LO_Canadiens or LockedOnCanadiens@gmail.com. Laura, where are we starting in the mailbag today? Because I know we have 7 million prospect questions here.
So I'm going to start with one. I've only seen his stats. This comes from Steve on Twitter. I've only seen his stats, so I wonder what makes Lindstrom rated between 3 and 6 on most draft lists. From what I see, he was injured a huge chunk of the year, and a 1.4 point per game and 2 points in 4 playoff games. What is your case for him being a sure thing NHL star?
Yeah, so what's really interesting with Lindstrom is you've got a combination of size and skill you don't always see at the draft. And usually those guys, they go quick. Yuri Slafkovsky, first overall in 2022. There was a reason for that, and obviously it was a contentious pick. But in hindsight, it's looking pretty good. Beyond that, I mean, there's a real pestiness to his game. He's first a great person off the ice, a fantastic person off the ice by all accounts. Everything I've read about him, everything I've heard about him indicates that this is a real stand-up person. But once you get him on the ice, it's like his personality changes. He's cross-checking guys in the ribs. He's giving little shots after the whistle. He's getting under opponent's skin, chirping a lot. He's the type of player that wins over coaches really quickly and really easily. But beyond that, yes, he was injured all year, but I think he got more puck touches than like half the WHL's forwards in half the amount of games. Like he's always on the puck. And that's just really interesting is because with Lindstrom, you've got a player who's still raw in terms of habits, in terms of decision-making. He's still got some things to learn on that side. But because he gets so many puck touches, he's basically doubling his opportunities to improve on those elements. He's facing many scenarios in which he's back to the boards with 2 guys on his back, and he has to make a decision quickly. So the scenarios he's facing are also playing a huge part in how far his development can go. So I think in terms of upside, he's top 3 in the draft with Demidov and Celebrini. His room for growth is massive because he's seeing so many scenarios that he needs to improve, and he's seeing them twice as often as other prospects in this draft, including guys like Iginla and Catton, those guys. Catton is a player, for example, who is always seeing scenarios which he already excels in, transition scenarios. He's one of the most shifty and elusive players in this draft, but he's not really improving the rest of this game because he's only seeing the scenarios he's good at. With Lindstrom, he's putting himself in situations where, oh, I need to work on this. Well, let me get into that board battle and put myself in a situation where I have to make a quick decision. It's not even conscious, really. It's just the way that he plays, the decisions he makes on the ice, put him in situations where he's inevitably going to learn the things that he needs to learn. So beyond just already being so skillful, already being such a good net front presence and dominating the boards with his physicality, and again, just being a pest, he's also got a lot of room for improvement because he's facing scenarios that he's going to improve in. So that's what makes him really interesting for me.
So if you are Columbus or Anaheim, don't listen to what Hadi just said. We're going to turn our attention back. I know we're talking so much draft, but a couple of Habs prospect questions. And our friend Jeff the Red asks, what are the realistic ceilings and NHL ETAs for Engstrom and Kapanen?
Oh, that's a very good question. I haven't been following a lot of the European leagues, especially not for drafted players, more for draft eligibles. But what I've seen from Oliver Kapanen at this men's Worlds has been fantastic. He's been honestly one of Finland's best players, if not their best player. Despite the fact that they lost against Austria with that heartbreak of a last second goal there. But what's
Austria's
really interesting,
having a good time of it.
they really are. They took Canada to OT. Like, that's ridiculous. But yeah, I mean, in terms of what Kapanen brings to the game, he's a very translatable kind of cycle player. So I like the way that he's able to quickly put pucks back on his teammates' sticks. So if a shot's taken from the point, it's blocked, it's going to the boards, he's first on it. He reads the game really well. I don't see necessarily anything more than a kind of middle six, either center or winger, out of Kapanen. That's kind of a best case scenario, just because he doesn't have the highest level of skill. He just has really refined habits, really good decision making, which usually gets you in a kind of supporting role. So I think kind of the complementary guy on the second line would be the best case scenario. But I think more likely than not, we're looking at a bottom sixer on a really good team, which Habs should be. Again, they probably have like 96 of these guys in the pool. Like, it's ridiculous. They have so many bottom six projected players. Yeah. So it's just about finding a spot in there.
It's about and also the right mix of them. Sorry.
I forgot about Engstrom. Sorry about that. Adam Engstrom, very, very interesting player. I love the mobility. I love the rush defending, and I love the puck moving ability. He makes a great breakout pass. He's gotten a lot better at kind of learning. The way his coach put it in the SHL was learning how to play chess. So learning when to go all in, learning when to call, learning when to fold. That's really important defensively. He's not aggressive in your face all the time like he used to. He's not over trusting his feet. He's staying composed, reading the play, making the right decision. When he needs to be aggressive, he is. When he needs to sit back, he does. He's learning that kind of balance really well. I think you're getting kind of a number 4 defenseman out of Engstrom. So not necessarily the key piece on the second line, but the complementary piece. If you compare it with a guy like Mayu or Reinbacher down the line, that'd be interesting. But it complicates things because, again, how many left-handed defensemen do the Habs have? It's absurd.
Yeah, from middle pairing too. All of them like good middle pairing options, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But I think he could be he also plays the right side sometimes. So I think he could be a good kind of number 5 right side defender. As a left shot D. So that's an option.
Scott, do we have time for one more question?
We do, but not before I make one comparison that's going to drive Patrick Bexell nuts. Listening to Hadi's description of Oliver Kapanen being someone who's maybe not the most skilled, but does all the little things right that coaches love, and he's also Finnish, screams Arturi Lehkonen. And now that Pat's going to fly over here and kick my own ass, yes, we have time for one more question in this segment, Laura.
Patrick, we love you. Come on the show. All right. I want to talk about Beckett Sennecke because he seems to be like this year's player where like there's smoke around the Habs wanting him, and then half the fan base is like, no way. And then the other half is like trying to talk themselves into it. It feels like a David Reinbacher situation. I know it's a complete different player, but I'm
fan bases.
It's your fan bases. But we have like a specific question from our friend Boondoggle, and he asks, is Sennecke the real deal, or is this another Kotkaniemi situation?
Listen, there's so many different outcomes for Sennecke, but for me, all roads kind of point probably to a second line role at best. I'm not really sold on the top line upside. I understand that this is a kid that grew 6-7 inches in the past year and a half. Like, he was like 5'9" at 15 years old, 16 years old. Now he's like 6'3", 180. So he's still lanky. He's very uncoordinated. Still learning how to use that size. But the handling skill's legit. Like, he's got really great handling skills. He's able to deke through opponents. But I feel like he's a lot more reactive than proactive. He's a guy who just kind of improvises once he gets the puck. He just kind of, runs and guns it and figures it out on the fly. But all great improvisers at the NHL level also can be proactive, can anticipate play, can predict what opponents are going to do. So adding that layer is super important. But that's such a tough layer to add that I think in order for him to be a bona fide top liner, he'd need to be able to do that. And that's what makes him kind of I don't know, I'd say a reach at 5. Like, he's in the 12 to 20 range for me, for sure. Closer to 12 than 20, but in that kind of glut of players. So, yeah, I have my hesitations about 5, but if you want to trade down, maybe get rid of a contract or add a good prospect as well, or another pick at, I don't know, 10, 11, 12, and select him, I'm sure he's going to be available. I don't know of a lot of teams that are that high on Sennecke. And there's a lot of good players there. Yeah.
Right. Like, this is probably going to be the last time in a long time that you get to pick a fifth, right? And another question was like, how much on a scale of 1 to 10 are we worried that Bobrovsky will galaxy brain the organization into taking him? I don't know if it's necessarily a galaxy brain situation as much as it's a why did you do that when you could have done this situation?
Yeah.
Just like last year. We got used to it. We love David Reinbacher. That's not, we don't, but like everybody was clamoring for a different player. And I feel like this is kind of a similar situation.
It feels like picking a project, which is not a bad thing. Like you said, there are translatable skills there versus someone who maybe has a more finished product with a higher ceiling. It's not the worst thing that they could do, but it is probably not it's like going to a dealership and seeing a Ferrari, a Porsche, and then like a Honda Civic and picking the Honda Civic, and that it's sensible and it will do exactly what you want it to do. It will not do 180 on the Autobahn with the top down for you, unfortunately. So we have so many more mailbag questions, and we're going to get to the rest of those coming up in our next segment. But first, also in today's show is eBay Motors, because passion, drive, and patience, the formula for winning championships, is what also keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for or your money back, because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, you're not burning cash. And with all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. So keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Some exclusions apply. eBay guaranteed fit, available only to U.S. customers. We are back here at Locked On Canadiens / Locked On NHL Prospects with Hadi, one of the hosts of that. We are doing a big 2024 Montreal Canadiens based mailbag today. If you ever have more questions, at LO_Canadiens, Locked On Canadiens at gmail.com. Laura, what else is in the bag of goodies today?
Okay. So I asked Hadi how to pronounce these names before, and now I forgot. So our friend Claude S., and he sent this question to us at the end of February, right? I'm bringing it up now because I promised him I would save it until we had our next prospect guest. If Salayev or Levshinov are available where the Habs are picking, would you consider moving down to take a forward or trade the pick outright for an established young forward such as Trevor Zegras?
Great pronunciation, by the way. You got that right, Salayev and Levshinov. That's fantastic. Yeah, I mean, teams are going to want those guys. Like, I'd actually be surprised if Salayev is available at 5. I'd also be surprised if Levshinov is. Like, there's a realm of possibilities in which the 3 picks after Celebrini are Demidov, Salayev, Levshinov. That wouldn't shock me at all. Those 3 guys, I think if they're available at 5, if one of the teams ahead of Montreal goes for a Lindstrom or an Iginla or whoever else, teams are going to be calling, and I think that you answer the call, especially if they're eyeing Sennecke. He's almost definitely going to be available at 9, 10, 11. I know Calgary's interested in trading up. I know that's been something that's been discussed in mock drafts and stuff like that. The Athletic put out a mock draft where the Habs traded down to 9th and picked Tij Iginla, which would surprise me because Calgary, he's not getting past Calgary. They're picking him. Like, there's no way. But yeah, I think that in terms of the realm of possibilities, the forwards you would get at 9 are very interesting. If it's not Sennecke, if Iginla's gone, if Lindstrom's gone, you've got Trevor Connolly, which I would stay away from. But Berkly Catton, Cole Eigeman are options as well in terms of players who project as wingers, who have skill, who've got standout traits. So yeah, I think it's a smart decision. I wouldn't say that, trading down, sure. Trading for Zegras, I don't know, because the options you would get at 5 or at 9 or at 10 or wherever they trade down, I think are better long-term options for the Habs than Zegras. Zegras is going to want to play center. He plays like a winger, but his natural position is center. So, and in terms of fit with the Habs, I don't know where he slots in, and I'm not as confident with him becoming kind of a franchise leading player. He reminds me a lot of Jonathan Drouin in some ways. And we know how that turned out. So I would personally steer clear, but you know, there's options there.
You mentioned Iginla. This is just a comment from one of our listeners. The more I learn about Tij Iginla, especially after his under 18 performance, the more I think he's the best available option for the Habs. Hadi and Sebastian are very high on him now, and I trust those two. So I just wanted to bring it up. And I think like as time has gone on, we're also like getting higher on Iginla than we were. So you mentioned also Berkly Catton. I know that Sebastian has him relatively high. Not all of our fan base is convinced. But a question we got from Ben, could you please compare Berkly Catton and Logan Cooley? They have similar highlight reels and drive the play. The criticism of Catton is that he's undersized, while taller than Cooley. If Cooley would have been a great pick at 5, why wouldn't Catton?
I think Logan Cooley has more projectable elements. He's got more energy. He's got some defensive value. He's able to get back and make defensive plays, and he's a natural center. Berkly Catton has been playing center this year for Spokane, but he's also been playing like 35 minutes a night. So take that with a grain of salt. Like they don't have many other options at forward who can be as reliable as he is. And yeah, if you look at the numbers, you'll be like, wow, man, that's a lot of points in the WHL. But he's playing. Cayden Lindstrom had more points per 60 than Berkly Catton. So that just to give you an idea. But Catton he's very similar to Cooley in the sense that they're both transition aces. They're able to escape pressure in transition extremely well. I think Berkly Catton has some of the best kind of 3-step acceleration that I've seen from any prospect this year. So there's a lot of really interesting tools with Catton. And yeah, I agree that the undersized kind of motto, like he's 4 centimeters smaller than the average size in the NHL, but it's less about height and more about disposition. He gets pushed around. He gets pushed off of pucks fairly easily. He struggles on retrievals, and isn't really the best defensive player. But in terms of pure offensive upside, for me, he has more upside than Tij Iginla. But Tij Iginla, but it's not by a lot. It's not by enough to justify Tij Iginla being lower than him. For me, Iginla is a sure top 6 player. Like I don't see any scenario where Iginla doesn't at least land on the second line. It's because of how everything he does is things that coaches love, that coaches will want to put back on the ice immediately. This is a player who immediately gets trusted. And he's the best board player in this draft. Like no one gets off the boards and makes plays off the board as well as Tij Iginla. So that's how I compare the two. But I'd say, yeah, between Catton and Cooley, what makes Cooley more interesting is he's a natural center, and he's more responsible and more mature in his game at the same age.
I think that's a really interesting question. I've got another one. This is one we haven't had. So a lot of the questions that come up are pretty common, same players. This one comes from Cameron. I have a draft-related question. Any thoughts on Justin Poirier? He's had a 50-goal season in the Q, but isn't projecting to be a first or second round pick. Like Joshua Roy, could he be a sleeper pick in a later round? Would you like to see the Habs draft him in the second or third round if he's available?
Second or third round, sure, absolutely. Around the 50 range is when I would say really kind of you might want to run to the stage and pick him. Poirier is really interesting because he is a pure goal scorer in the sense that he doesn't really offer much in terms of playmaking or handling, but the goal scoring, at first I saw him as kind of just a curl and drag and shoot type of guy and a really kind of one-trick pony shooting-wise, but as the years gone on, he's diversified his toolkit. He's added backhands and one-timers and slap shots and snap shots and just a wide variety of shots to his arsenal, which has made him really interesting. And on top of that, he's a really violent kid. Like he's in those corners just pushing you around. He's driving you into the boards, just making his presence known. So that combination is fairly interesting. It's just outside of that, he's not the best skater, not the biggest guy either. Doesn't offer much in terms of board ability, doesn't offer much defensively. But if you want to bet on his goal scoring, like him being the first 50-goal scorer since among draft eligibles in the queue since Sidney Crosby is not something you can kind of knock. He is really well surrounded, though. That Bicomo team is really, really good. They've got a couple other draft eligibles that are really interesting.
And the listener did point to that like draft eligibility thing that you brought up. Sorry, Scott, go ahead.
No, it's just funny is that you talk about how he like violently goes into corners in like the battles and that. And I'm looking at him, I'm like, oh, 50 goals, he's got to be maybe, usual 6'1", 6'2". He's got a little bit of size to him. He's 5'8" and 180 pounds, which probably means he's just stocky and muscular as all hell.
Xavier Simoneau.
Exactly where I was going with this. You knew exactly where I was going with this. One of my favorite prospects playing for the Rocket.
A little brick half wall.
Just a pit bull of a player, basically. In that it's like you might be bigger than him, but you're not gonna like any being around him at all. So I know Matt Drake at Eyes on the Prize loves this, and that in mock drafts, if he's there in the third round or even late second, I'd just go, why not? They have that late second round pick from the Avs trade. This seems like the perfect potential fit right there for that. Laura, we have time for one more. There's one more in there.
Yes, there is. Well, there's a few more. So if we didn't ask your question, we'll ask it to our next prospect. Yes, don't worry and keep them coming. But this one is a fun one. I'd like all three of us to answer this question. Other than Montreal, what bottom of the league team would you want to see make a splash at the draft? This comes from Randy Hansen.
Ooh.
Yeah.
San Jose has options. They have options and needs. I think that San Jose is the best bet to do something crazy at the draft, but they're not trading that first overall pick. It's celebrating. It's just after that, what do you do? That's a big question.
No, and like them picking at 14 as well gives them another like double crack at the apple here, so to speak. For me, I'm kind of interested to see because Buffalo always does this. Someone inevitably always falls to the Sabres. We go, how did that happen? And then the Sabres just don't get any better, but that's neither here nor there. It's like looking at it looks like Yuri Kulik a couple of years ago and Zach Benson last year, and they're sitting at 11th right there. There should be a much better team next year who's going to get to add a really good player and potentially a really good defenseman to help hopefully fix more of that defensive core. Columbus is in there. Jay, I love you. I can only watch them pick so many talented players and then stay where they are. And I realize I just said that about Buffalo, but I have to deal with Sabres fans every day in my day job. So the better the Sabres are, the more fun my day job gets because I can sell more things to them. So,
before I answer I answer for myself. Has Columbus picked a GM yet?
No, but apparently, allegedly, Ken Holland is in the mix along with Mark Bergevin, to which I can hear Jay screaming in England right now. So,
the reason that I ask that is because I would like Columbus to not have a GM, but then have the best draft.
Oh my goodness!
Trevor Timmons running a draft table for Columbus is not the worst thing I've ever heard of. They've had a very good couple of drafts with him heading up their scouting department recently. So I'd be a little afraid of what they would do if they just gave him full control over that.
Yeah,
which good for them.
The over/under on five U.S. high school prospects drafted by Columbus in that year is looking good. But yeah, no, I agree.
And that's it for the questions for today because we've run out of time. But please,
you didn't even answer your own question, Laura.
I didn't. No, I said Columbus.
Oh, you did? Okay. Anyways, I'm just going to cut you off on that then. That does wrap up our show. Hadi, do you want to tell our listeners where they can find you on social media and their podcast platforms?
Absolutely. So wherever you're listening to this, whether you're listening or watching, just look up Locked On NHL Prospects and you'll find Sebastian and I talking about prospects you've never heard of on a daily basis. Otherwise, Twitter, HadiK_scouting. If you're watching on YouTube, it's right under my face. That's the one-stop shop. I post everything there, rankings, videos, all that good stuff goes there.
All right, and that is going to wrap it up for us. As always, you can follow Laura at The Active Stick. You can follow myself at Scott Matla on the app formerly known as Twitter. Subscribe to Locked On Canadiens at YouTube.com. Subscribe to Locked On NHL Prospect. We have so much more draft content coming. There will be more mock drafts, more scouting experts. If you have more questions, again, at LO_Canadiens, LockedOnCanadiens@gmail.com. Hadi, thank you so much. Everyone, thanks for tuning in, and we will see you all next time.
You are...
That's the wrong one.